King Land and Water, one of our big partners out here. They're sponsoring this next session. We really appreciate James King and his team for helping us out. The next presentation is called Ranching in the Trans-Pecos, Texas. It's coming from a fellow who knows something about that. Wayne Seipp was born in Fredericksburg and grew up on a multi-species ranch in the Texas Hill Country. He graduated from Fredericksburg High School and attended Sul Ross State University in Alpine for 2 years. Wayne then transferred to Texas Tech University in Lubbock and received a Bachelor of Science in Range Management and earned a Master of Science degree at Texas Tech University in Range Science in 1982. He began a career with the Soil Conservation Service in Marfa and spent 25 years working for the SCS and eventually the NRCS at Marfa, Balmorhea, and Alpine. In the early 1990s, Wayne began leasing land running his own cows in the Trans-Pecos. He transferred back to the Hill Country in 2009 to live on family land in Llano County and continues to raise cattle and goats on owned and leased land. Wayne retired from NRCS in 2017 and currently works for the Gillespie and Mason County Soil and Water Conservation Districts part-time as a conservation planner. He wrote, "I like being on the land, and I still enjoy working with people that are trying to become better stewards of their property." Can't beat that. What a career. Wayne?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Billy. I'm sure that there's many other people that could give you more information on ranching in the Trans-Pecos than maybe I can. But today, I just want to share with you some of the knowledge I gained from living and working and personally ranching in the Trans-Pecos area for about 25 years. I'm going to approach this from a range management perspective today, and so we need to digest a lot of stuff. We're in a pretty big area here. It's pretty vast, so hopefully as we go through this, we're going to dissect it enough that we can kind of understand where we're all going. Just to follow up with the first two speakers, there's probably not anything more important than monitoring the weather if you're ranching out here, because it's kind of the driver, the lifeblood of everything that a ranch has to depend on. So I'm going to start off with saying, I don't know how many of you ever heard this, but getting older is not for sissies, and neither is ranching in the Trans-Pecos. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is a very unique area of the state because we have such a elevation change. It's really complex. We go from 8,700 feet down to 2,000 feet, and from the first presentation, you can see how those different areas vary in rainfall. And so if we're going to talk about ranching in the Trans-Pecos, we need to know where we are. Oh, I got to get this clicker. So, as we start this dissection, we're gonna talk about vegetative zones. That's these stair steps in the Trans-Pecos as we go down slope from the Mount Livermore to the river. So, it's much cooler in the mountains, as we learned earlier, and we have more precipitation up there, and then all those factors affect what plant communities that we have in those areas. So the first division is vegetative zones, and so we've got the mountain savanna, the mixed prairie, the desert grassland, and then the hot desert shrub. And then within these zones, the soil scientists and range managers have delineated soil series that correspond to the ecological sites that occur there. So when we'll start out, this is all going to be igneous bedrock, parent material, and different soils. So we're out in the mountain savanna. It's about around 6,500 feet. It's the coolest region in the Trans-Pecos, has the highest rainfall. And so if you were to go, say, from the observatory up into the mountains, you would be in the mountain savanna. You're going to have some pinyon oak. There'll be a few pines in the very top. There's even a few aspen up there right off the base of Baldy. So that's the highest, coolest part of the Trans-Pecos. The next one is the mixed prairie, and that one's going to range from about 4,500 to 6,500 feet. It's about a 14 to 20 inch rainfall. To me, this is kind of the cow country of the Trans-Pecos. It's these Marfa alpine flats going up towards, not to the observatory, but up to the top. This is a really very productive vegetative zone. As we head a little further south, we're going to get down into the desert grassland. This is really good at ranch country too. It's starting to get a little drier. We're picking up a little more shrub component. You're kind of probably a balance between shrubs and also grasses and forbs. So, like there again, we're going down the stair step to try to figure out where we are. Okay, so the mountain savanna we started, that's about over 6,500 feet. Then from the mixed prairie, about 4,500 to 6,500. The desert grassland, 3,500 to 4,500. And then the hot desert shrub is going to be from the river bottom, which is around 2,000 to 35. And this is a tough one. I mean, the hot desert shrub, it doesn't really get much rain, maybe 10 to 13 inches a year. And, you might get a third of your annual precipitation in one storm. So, it's pretty sporadic and pretty tough down there. Okay, we're going to start talking about some ecological sites. We've got the vegetative zones. And so within these vegetative zones, they're broken into ecological sites. With, the scientists worked on this. They analyzed what plant communities fit with each soil type, and then they developed the ecological sites. And then later on, they analyzed these, and they tried to compare them pretty much with what was historic, before European man came in and started doing different things. And so they picked the historic plant community. And then they started saying, okay, well, if this was historic, where are we now? And so they developed these state and transition models and tried to figure out, okay, what were the drivers? If this site was in this condition historically, why is it in this condition now? Was it lack of fire? Was it drought? Was it overutilization or whatever? But they tried to give you those drivers so that somebody could maybe look at that data and say, okay, well, if I implement this practice, then maybe I can shift this plant community this direction. There's quite a bit of ecological site data on the NRCS websites. Another really good resource is the Web Soil Survey. Web Soil Survey is a little tough to use out here with these old big ranches, because, a 20,000 acre ranch is a lot different than a 50 acre ranch in the hill country. So you got to get a little creative to use it. But the ecological sites are a pretty good tool as we're figuring out where we are in the landscape. It gives us an idea of what plants should be occurring there. They give an estimate of forage production. And then, like I say, that's good information. It's a good baseline. But I think you really need to be on site to evaluate the condition of the land. There's kind of two ways you can look at rangeland, in my opinion. One is a horizontal look, and one is vertical. I think the horizontal looks pretty misleading. You go out there and you see some seed heads out here in the fall, blue grama kind of waving around. You think, man, we're in pretty good shape here. We're doing all right. Then you get out there and you get on old paint, you start riding around there, you take a hike, and if you've got a lot of bare ground between those plants, that's the real look at the land. In the fall, I always thought out here, if you're riding along and that horse's feet aren't touching bare ground, you're in pretty good shape. So to kind of think a little more of these ecological sites, we have a landform here, okay? And does anybody see any distinct differences there? Yeah. All right, well, people like Lynn Loomis can really help us out. So what they've done is they've taken this landform and divided it into ecological sites. As you can see down there on the river, that's a loamy bottomland site. And then above it on the landscape, you got the gravelly. And then as you go up into the hills, you're in limestone hill and mountain. So now you can kind of see it from the beginning, and we can plug them back in, and there they are. So that's how we're still dissecting here, okay? So we've identified what veg zone we're in. We're trying to figure out what our ecological sites are. So here we go. This is those state and transition models we were talking about. We've identified our site, and today we're going to look at the mixed prairie vegetative zone on a clay loam site. So here's a clay loam site, mixed prairie. It's a blue grama prairie. And so that site's in pretty good condition. You don't see much bare ground. Blue grama is a warm season perennial. It's very productive, and it's highly palatable. Okay, so now we're going to look at another little change here. This is the clay loam mixed prairie again, but this plant community has shifted to a annual 3-on prairie. Keyword, they're annual. Those aren't perennial plants, and annual plants are going to cycle out, and then they'll go ahead and dry out. And out here, like they talked about the weather, in about March, they may be blown away. So you're not going to have a lot of good soil protection here, but at least the land is covered. If you get some precip on this site, then you're going to have some protection to reduce erosion or so forth. Okay, looks like we're kind of slipping a little here. We've got a sparse grass, and we've gone to an annual forb site. So there's been some driver, whether it was not good grazing management, maybe drought, or maybe a fire went through this site. We didn't get a lot of good rain follow-up, so some of these perennial plants started to die out. But the note here is look at our bare ground. I mean, you know, that soil's not protective, and it's probably not 30% of what the normal production would be from that first slide. And then now we've fallen off the edge of the earth. We've got an annual forb site. So that site has regressed so far, it's going to need some form of reclamation. And maybe that's reseeding. It's going to need a lot of rest. And reseeding in the Trans-Pecos is a tough game. You know, in the hill country, you can put out grass, and if you have a good May, you know, you may have grass headed out by the, end of June. In the Trans-Pecos, you may seed that, and you may not get a rain for 2 or 3 years. So, the key thing here is don't let it get to that point. Do whatever you can to maintain those better quality grasses and keep that site protected. All right, this is a good one, stocking rates. I don't know how many people, I used to work here too, and somebody come in there and say, well, what's the stocking rate for Presidio County? I'd say, well, how far is it to the moon? That you can't answer that question because, number one, You don't know where you are. You don't know what vegetative zone you're in. You don't know what ecological site you're on. And you don't even know what condition it is. Okay, so that you just can't really answer that question. So probably the best way to figure out a stocking rate is to try to conduct a forage inventory. I mean, now we know where we are. Now we got to figure out what we're going to do. So, you can go out there and you can set up plots. You can clip. You can try to get some forage production because you're trying to build a case for a specific ranch. Where are we at? What are we going to do? So here's kind of the big deal here is you need to balance your forage production with your animal demand, okay? So we're going to look at some X's and O's here. That was always helpful to me is because, it's data, but it's better than just a guess. You know what I'm saying? It's an educated guess, so you can try to get in the ballpark. And so, like I said, we'd go out there, we'd clip, or if you've clipped enough and you're really good at estimating, then you can get your production by site, okay? And, it doesn't have to be by species. It doesn't have to be X amount of blue grama, X amount of black grama. I mean, if it's grazable, decent forage, you can start with that and you're still going to be in the ballpark. So then you need to think about accessible acres. And there's two big drivers here, is distance from water or roughness of terrain, especially rocky slopes. So, ideal out here is half a mile from water to grazing area. And the textbooks say, a mile is okay. Well, when you start looking at that utilization from that water trough to a mile away, if it's rocky, you're going to see a big, vast difference there. So what you really want to do is kind of figure out what's accessible. And the big insurance policy in here is at 0.25. That's the harvest efficiency. Okay, so if we went out here and we clipped 500 pounds of grass, and we have 1,000 acres, and don't worry about the math, we'll get there. But then you take that times 0.25, okay? Because the range rule of thumb is take half, leave half. But out here with the insects, the wind, and so forth, we said, look, of that half we're going to take, let's only bank on half of that half, or 25% of the total. So then, an old cow is going to eat about 26 pounds a day, and she's going to eat every day. That's 365 days, so that's 94.90, and that's kind of conservative. Because, it's something that's happening in the cow business. All these 1,000-pound cows that the literature's based on weigh 1,500 now. So that's something we need to think about too, okay? Anyway, so what we did is we did all the math. So we could put 13 animal units on that 1,000 acres. So then our stocking rate is 77 acres per animal unit. Okay, so we've gone from just a guess to we've narrowed it down a little bit. Whoop. Okay, so this, I think this is probably one of the best documents that you can have in your ranch plan or anything, and it's pretty busy. I'll tell you that. But once you go through it, if you do this one time, and then you go out there the next year, the only number you got to change is your forage production, okay? Because everything else is just going to go ahead and compute. Oh, let me find this pointer thing. Okay, so here's our water accessibility, our topo accessibility, that's slope or rock, how much are they going to use of that pasture? So we started out with, let's just do Igneous Hill and Mountain. There was 1,600 acres. We didn't have it all that well watered. It's pretty rough. So we're saying, okay, we can only use 964 acres of that pasture effectively. And then our forage production, that was the total. That's 25%. That's what the cow's going to eat. So that equates to 21.8. Whoa. Sorry about that. Okay, I think I'm back. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So one thing in this, okay, well, let's see, that observatory pasture, that's 1,777 acres. That's pretty big. And we go over here, and it's 26 animal units. Okay, this middle pasture here that's 15, so that's nearly double. Would it be worth trying to split that up and try to get that balanced out? So if we want to do a rotation, then we can work that in better on a rotation plan. There's another big pasture, but in my opinion, that's not too big. We're only at 7. Anyway, that's 17 animal units, so I'm not too concerned about that. But just remember again, the key driver is that 25% harvest efficiency. That's kind of your insurance policy to get to the end of the year. And then, of course, you have an ultimate stocking rate for the ranch, and that's what is not an easy answer to give unless you have this information. All right, we're gonna change a little. We're gonna go to supplemental feeding. Normally, about all we ever try to provide the livestock in the Trans-Pecos is some form of protein supplement. It could be range cubes, liquid feed, protein tubs. You just need to see what works for your operation. Do you have the infrastructure to feed cake? Do you have a trip hopper feeder? Do you have the labor to do it? How much time do you have to do it? You just got to figure out what works for you. It's not cheap anymore either. This is the biggie right here. That's why all the work we put in to doing our forage inventory was so that we could balance animal demand with forage production, because energy is the biggest use for livestock on rangeland in the Trans-Pecos. And it's the highest daily demand. We said, well, they ate 26 pounds per head per day. Well, hay is not cheap, and transportation is not cheap. And then, it's one thing to go throw out a bale of hay to 2 heifers in the pen, but you got 200 cows out there in that pasture, then you better get after it. I'll move along. Okay, there was a slide on mineral. I think mineral's important. The key thing here is there's some thought that a good mineral program will help you combat some poisonous plant problems. Let's talk about a few X factors here. I think we all know rainfall is the big driver in the Trans-Pecos. There's no guarantee how much it's going to rain or even if it will rain. Yeah, that may be too much, but I'd rather have a little too much than not enough, like this picture. I learned a new term not long ago. It says be pivotal. Probably heard that on the Food Network, Something didn't work, we got to change our plan. So you need to be conservative out here. You need to have a good forage inventory. You need to make the annual adjustments. And just a note, don't fall in love with your cows and don't name them. Toxic plants, they're here. We got to live with them. If you're getting into the ranching here, if you have access to native cattle, that's always good. They've acclimated to the area, and there's some thought that the mothers teach the offspring what to avoid. We got Garbancia, and we have the locos. There's also twin leaf cinnamon, red leaf groundsel. There's several toxic plants here. The key thing is know what plants are in your area and how they affect livestock. Do your homework on that. There again, there's woolly loco. It's usually really does well if we have any fall moisture, you're probably going to have loco in the spring and early summer. So to me, that's a big thing is if I'm bringing in new cattle, I'm not going to bring them in the winter or spring, because that may be the only thing that's green out there. If you're going to bring in new cattle, I'd probably wait till in the fall after a good growing season. Topography and rock cover, it's here. It's part of the Trans-Pecos. So we can, probably the best thing we can do is have a really good water system in place so that these cattle aren't having to cover long distances in rocky, steep country. You don't want these great big old cows. And cattle will acclimate to this country, but it's not going to happen overnight. You bring in some cows from Kansas and put them in these rocky hills, that if they're slick and fat when you turn them out, they're going to be hard to look at when you go back in about 6 or 8 months. And sometimes they won't breed up quite as good. The other thing is, you buy these really nice fat bulls, then turn them out, and all of a sudden they can't walk, so your calf crop may suffer a bit. Brushing weeds, they're out here, they're all over the state. My thing is, a site can grow X amount of something. It could either be grass, weeds, or brush. So you just need to deal with that in whatever way you can. Brush management mechanical, it's pretty expensive, usually effective. There's chemical. You can, this is a function of really growth conditions for leaf condition, and then, a lot of them are soil applied, so they need water to activate them. Wildlife, it's here. I'm sure probably somebody's going to talk about it. They're a good economic boost to the land. They need to be managed as well. Probably the biggest management is predator control or invasive species like aoudad. They need to have good water systems and a good harvest practice. Consult an expert in the area. They can give you a whole lot more information. Erosion, it's always going to be some erosion out here. Geologically, that's okay. Some of the worst is man-made on roads. This was always a pet peeve of mine when I went to a ranch, and there's abandoned road 1. We let it wash out, so we just moved it over and kept driving. And then, heck, we're on number 3 now. Fix it once and then maintain it. You don't have to deal with that. Pickups are getting pretty expensive. Some final thoughts. I think you need to be open-minded and gain as much knowledge as you can. There's people out here that know a lot about it. If you have a concern, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, and say, hey, you got NRCS here, Parks and Wildlife, bounce it off of them. Develop some realistic goals. And if you own your land or lease it to someone else to graze, kind of be flexible with them, because, they're trying to make this work, but you want them to take care of the land. So, lease it on an animal unit basis, not the acres, so they have to overutilize it to make it work. We all have phones now. Take a lot of pictures. It's amazing how fast time passes. And if you've got a good digital library, you can kind of go back in 2 or 3 years and say, hey, this is working, or maybe we need to rethink this. Ranching out here does require a lot of patience. It's not like other areas in the state where it does rain sometime. So just be flexible and just remember, Mother Nature's plans, or the best laid plans, are in Mother Nature's hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. We have time for a couple of questions.
I've noticed that the cattle seem to be a lot smaller out here. Is it just the fact that the big cattle just can't make it? I mean, do you have any kind of a rule of thumb on the size of the cattle?
Yeah, I mean, I think those old big cattle have kind of selected themselves out, you know. And how it seems like to me how a cow does that in the Trans-Pecos is if she's so big that she's not getting enough forage, she's not going to be in good enough shape to breed back, so she's going to cull herself. So, you know, you're going to find a set of cows that fits a set of country. You know, it just may take a little while.
Okay, thanks. I guess this makes a smaller calf too, though, right?
Well, yeah, but you know, they're getting better with these breeds. So, you know, that bull's going to breed maybe 15 to 25 cows. So maybe get you kind of a low birth weight kind of bull, but a good growth bull. And then maybe you can make that ground up without spending so much on feed that big cow is going to eat.
One more question. In this Marfa area, is there a particular, is it a black ballie? Is that a favorite, or her, what's the going?
Well, I mean, they've kind of shifted a little away from, but a good Angus base, a lot of people call them Angus Plus. So you got a little hybrid bigger in there, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm in love with black ballie cows. I think they're just the greatest, but that's just me. But, you know, you can get some that aren't real big, you know, maybe a 1,200-pound cow work. You know, have you structured up where you've got a good water system, you know what I'm saying? They can get to everywhere, and then put some good growth bulls on them, and I think you'd be good.
Okay, thank you.
I encourage y'all to, if you want to visit with Wayne, you're going to be here all day. There's not anybody out here that has spent time out here that probably has as much knowledge over time that Wayne has, and he's a tremendous resource. I encourage you to visit with him.